John and Charlotte, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Very well. It's so happy to be here this morning with you.
Well, I'm very excited because this is my first, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm interviewing two people basically, which is a first. It's always been one-to-one. So I'm excited to have both of you here. And I did want to ask, first question actually was, do you have a particular side that you sit, like Ant and Dec? They have a side, like Dec sits on the right every time.
Yes.
You do.
It depends what's going on with my hair, we're honest.
It
It's on the light and
location. It usually tends to be Charlotte on the left. Or
That's right.
Like,
yeah, actually, it looks familiar because, every video I've looked at you guys, you sit on the same side. So brilliant. So you have a set side. Amazing. And just to let listeners know, you're just up the road from me. You're about an hour. You're Abu Dhabi, aren't you?
We are indeed. We're back in the sandpit. Yeah. So we moved to UAE in 2013, dipped out for a bit to Thailand, and then just come back.
And it's just getting slightly toasty here, isn't it? It's just warming up. It's getting a little bit. Summer's on the way, and everyone leaves. Brilliant. So we're going to talk about all sorts of things. No real agenda. Stress is a thing. We'll have a chat about you guys. But before we do kick off, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to listeners, who you guys are and what you're all about.
Yeah.
Ladies first.
All right. So obviously, like you've said, I'm Charlotte. This is Jonathan. We are partners in life, partners in business, and pretty much everything else, right? We are the founders of a company called The Wellness Theory that is based in, obviously, the UAE, but we do serve our UK community as well. And we are a wellness platform that specializes in stress relief. And we've just won the award of Wellness Platform of the Year in the UAE, which is very exciting, which we're super happy about because we've been at this since 2018. Wellness Theory was born, but we've been in the world of coaching, health and fitness for 35 years combined, maybe more than that now.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a while. So it's Wellness Theory might be a few years old, but what we've been doing has been decades, basically in the making. So we're excited to be recognized for what we've been doing, which is awesome, and just seeing the results that clients and people we work with have been getting.
That's amazing. I mean, it was actually one of my little things. I was going to congratulate you guys on the Wellness Platform of the Year. That was the award, wasn't it? And it was the Prestige Awards. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. and the global awards were by Corporate Livewire.
Wow. And how did you guys who nominated you? Did you put yourself forward as how does that work? Because there's some achievement.
Yeah, the back end of last year, we got contacted by them saying we've been nominated, and then we don't know who by. And then they said, can you just send us some information? We're like, okay, cool. And then you sent over basically all what we do and results, case studies, testimonies. Obviously being a registered business for good because we have a big giving back piece to our business as well. I think that probably played a part also.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they just mark it on certain criteria. I think I do know one of the big criteria at the moment with a lot of awards companies is that giving back element. Is that sustainability of what you're doing in business is how are you giving back to the community? How are you giving back to the people around you?
That's amazing. And it is all about that. I mean, and we're in the happiness and reducing stress game. And we know, don't we, that being of service and thinking about others is a driver of just feeling good about yourself. It's so true. So I was have a question. I saw the pictures as well. John, you looked very dapper. So before I knew you'd won the award, I saw you in the car. There was a picture on Instagram. And it was you two in a car. And I thought, aye. They look a bit smart. Are they off to a wedding? I didn't know what it was. And then I saw the picture. Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind describing, was it a three-piece you had on?
Yeah, pretty much. It was a suit I had.
Without the blazer.
Without the blazer, yeah. Without the blazer. It was too hot for the blazer. So just the vest. But yeah, it was just a three-piece suit that I had actually made in Dubai many years ago.
Nice one. It's nice for us fitness wellness professionals because we spend a lot of time in cash stuff, don't we? Apart from when we're presenting, when we work with clients, we're in tracksuits. when we wash up, we scrub up well, us fitness professionals, we certainly do. So actually, let's start with the organisation, because as I say, congratulations on that award, guys. That is amazing, and it's great to be associated with people like you and organisations like you. So in the fitness industry, I mean, Charlotte, you've been on the podcast, so I know your backstory. You guys have been in the fitness game a long time. You've earned your stripes. You know, you're not just without saying this, you're not one of these people that's go, I'm a wellness person, and you know, you sell candles that produce certain smells. You know, you've been in the trenches, you've worked with people, fitness, mindset, the whole stuff. But what was the driver for obviously setting up the organization, but specializing in stress, which I know you guys do?
It's basically through initially our own journeys of, not at the time we didn't realize it, but now looking back, we know that stress was a major cause of a lot of kind of the suffering we went through ourselves. For me, like I say, I started in the health and fitness industry at the age of 16, like 20 years ago, 21, somewhere around that area.
Someone's playing down his age.
16, John, that's proper. Yeah. That's like, was that like on the pool side or gym instructor or?
So first couple of months as a lifeguard.
Oh, I love it. That's proper starting in the fitness game.
Proper right at the bottom, yeah, definitely. But I started in that, and everything I learned, everything I was going through was all about the physical. It was always about nutrition. It was about training, and that whole mindset back then was train harder, eat cleaner, whatever clean eating is.
Yeah.
And it was just that. It was just constantly, basically, if I wasn't getting the results I wanted, it was, okay, train harder or be more strict with my eating. And I just kept that up for probably about the first 10 years of my career.
Wow.
And I lived in the gym. Very much I lived, breathe, eat, sleep. Everything was about fitness. Everything was about the gym. I worked in the gym. I trained in the gym. I pretty much lived in it for 17 hours a day. And my whole mindset around kind of working in that environment was, you had to act, you had to be, you had to look a certain way. So that was my kind of whole premise, is I had to be that person. I had to have a six-pack. I had to look like a personal trainer. I had to be very hard on the people I was managing. Everything had to be a certain way based on my perception of what I thought being in that industry was about. And that kind of led to a lot of stress of feeling like I wasn't good enough in certain roles, in certain areas, especially when going up to management level. So I went from being fitness instructor, personal trainer to up to fitness manager. And then when managing a team, that's when it kind of, I went down the route of what I learned from my own kind of childhood growing up, is men are supposed to be hard, not show emotion. It's like, it's that whole thing is you lead by fear type of mentality.
Yeah.
And that was my whole concept going forward into that industry, especially as a manager. And I was trying to do what, in one hand, kind of achieve my own goals of having a six-pack and being that cover model type of personal trainer, and then the other hand trying to manage a team of people where I never really learned how to manage properly. So I took my management side from the military and then from my own upbringing, and it was very stressful environment, and I used to cause my own stress, but I didn't realize it at the time. I was under that impression where people should do what I say the first time and do it right the first time. Like, there's no reason not to. And I used to just get myself so angry and so and frustrated of things not happening the way I wanted to happen. I would snap. My nickname at work by my colleagues was the Hulk, because I used to lose it like that. I was always angry all the time, and I was causing myself stress from that emotion or of anger, but also at the same time of killing myself in the gym to help relieve that stress. But it actually wasn't relieving; it was adding it on.
To everyone else as well, right?
Yeah, and
not just him.
Yeah, not just to everyone around. And then add on to the fact of very little sleep, drinking about 9 cups of coffee a day, basically my body, my nervous system was just shot to pieces. And I think it was about 10 years. It was literally those first 10 years, I started to develop a lot of pain, physical pain. I pretty much lived in pain most of my time. And I thought it was normal because I thought this was part of being in that industry. And then it got to the point where it turned chronic, and like extremely bad, where I had to really dial down on the training. Or it affected my work, it affected everything, to the point where I'd actually kind of lose part of my vision. I get blurry vision when the pain got so bad, it radiates into my head. And I tried everything: chiropractor, physio, injections in my spine, the whole 9 yards when it comes to trying to fix it. And it wasn't until I got so fed up with being in pain that I thought, okay, there's got to be another solution. And that's when I started to consider the holistic side. And before that, it was like, that didn't even exist. It was like, if it wasn't training or nutrition, it doesn't work, type of thing. And then I started to think, okay, I got so sick of the pain, I needed to try something different because nothing was working. And then I kind of started dabbling in meditation, breath work, stuff like that. And that's when I started to connect dots of, okay, there's more to our health and our wellness than eating well and moving regularly. There's a lot more to it. That's a very small part of it. And then when I started to really connected with breath work a lot, when I started to get into it. And when I really started to dial down it every single day, I think about 2 weeks after my initial kind of commitment to breath work, the pain I started to feel, that chronic pain, started to really dissipate, and actually completely got rid of it within 2 weeks of consistent committed breath work every day, retention breathing with some visualization work.
Yeah.
And I just remember standing up for one session, and the pain I felt for over 4 years, that chronic pain in my back that usually radiated into my head, that completely disappeared. And that was a huge shock to me. And I started to realize that it wasn't a physical problem I was facing. And the more I started to educate myself on the holistic side of wellness, I realized it was a lot of unresolved emotions, a lot of stored up, pent up emotional energy that I wasn't releasing, I wasn't resolving, which came from the times of the anger, the guilt, the shame, the not feeling good enough from the past that I used to just bottle down, because that's what I was taught growing up as a child. Not taught consciously, but what I picked up from the male role models around me is, as a man, you don't express emotion, or especially vulnerability. So you bottle it in, you hold it in, and you crack on and get on with it. And mine presented itself as chronic pain and outbursts from that. And I didn't realize that at the time until I started to really tap into the holistic side and realize I was holding on to so much emotional charge that I didn't let go of. I didn't know what it was, because I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't even know what emotions were at that time. Like, all I knew was anger. Anger was my go-to. That was it. All I knew.
Yeah.
So that's all I stuck. So it was,
There is, John, there
stress.
is so much in there that I actually just want to start here and unpack some of that stuff for the listeners. What I really like about you guys as fitness, wellness professionals, your mission, what you're doing, is your earned and learned experience. So I know, I've spoke to Charlotte at length, and all three of us actually have experienced pain, disease, discomfort, emotional challenges. And that's what I really love about the message that you guys are promoting. It's a very similar message to mine. Now, I was less of when I was managing the team of trainers, John, and a studio, I was less of, I didn't bark. I'm more of a people pleaser. I get angry, road rage and things like that, but I was a people pleaser. So that was and it was just bottling stuff up, and I didn't want to have a go at people. But let's start with, because we can base this on stress. It's such an important topic. And again, I think the mantra is move, which is fine. I get it. Move, metabolize adrenaline, cortisol, get rid of these inflammatory chemicals in the system. It's great. But overtraining. So let's start there, actually. So I'm sure listeners will be thinking, but I train regularly. What you just said there is you were training hard. The intensity was ramped up, probably no rest days apart from when you got ill. You were probably in a calorie deficit a lot of the time, which is a stressor in itself. Your nervous system's not. So you ended up with central sensitization. So Let's talk about that, guys. So people are sitting there listening, thinking, I exercise. The role of exercise in managing stress, because the intensity is important.
It's massively important. So we have to all realize, right, that within us, we have essentially what we call like this window of tolerance. And what that is we all have a certain capacity, right? We have this space within us, literally in our nervous system, actually, that helps us to stay in a resourceful space. So when we go to the gym and we get that sense of release, right? Or even if you go for a walk or on the weekend, often people drop into that resourceful space because they've come off of a heavy, intense work week, let's say, and we can drop into that calmer space. But what happens, we've got this window of tolerance that we keep diving in and out of throughout the week. So we move into that fight or flight mode, which is that hypervigilant mode, or we move into a hypo state, which is where we drop down and perhaps we start to withdraw. We feel a bit lethargic. We don't want to exercise. So we're always going in and out of that resourceful space and visiting this hyper or hypo space. So what happens when we're already stressed out, let's say off the back of work, or we've got some relationship stressors, like whatever the thing that's stressing you out is, we're often already in one of those states. We're often already outside of our window, our healthy window. So when we then go to the gym, we then put ourselves often into that hypervigilant space, right? Where we are just go, 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 go. So because we're in that space, actually now we're just stacking up even more stress. We call that literally stress stacking. And we feel like we are calming down, but that's actually just a bit of relief, right? That's coming. But what we're really doing is putting more pressure onto an already stressed system, which is actually very counterintuitive. It feels good at the time, but then we end up just continuing that, which leads to exhaustion and eventually burnout. But then we can sometimes get a bit addicted to that feeling, but actually it's because we're not looking any deeper at the states that we're in throughout the day. We're not looking at how to come back to that resourceful space and what's even triggering us to get into those unresourceful spaces.
I love that. And I think the way I describe it to some of my friends here in Dubai, I've got a friend of mine who's going to F45 5 times a week. He's doing HIIT classes every night. Stressful job. And the way I describe it to him is I start to say to him, look, your body doesn't know that you're at F45 jumping around and having fun. It thinks you're in danger. Why else would you be, using these energy resources to sprint and jump? And then when you leave, your nervous system's still going, maybe that danger's coming back. It keeps you ramped up. It's so true. And it can impact sleep. And there's so much that can feed into. So I sometimes say to people about the modality of exercise is like even switching it up and maybe not training so late in the day, this high intensity stuff, maybe not doing that is the thing. And I also think, just thinking off the top of my head, I think a lot of people get addicted to the community side of this stuff. So there's the session itself, but I think in the modern world, you guys probably agree, this lack of community, lack of people is sometimes the driver to keep going back to that class where you get, smash the life out of yourself. It really is.
We have to look at the role social connection is playing in exercise as well. And one of the reasons why I personally got really frustrated being solely in the fitness industry that was very much around tone up, weight, train hard, eat well, that mentality, was for that very reason. It really started to depersonalize the whole experience. And I personally had to take a big step out of it to really what is going on, because Matt, you've been in this game a long time. You've seen it. People come, they get results, and then they lose them again. Get results, lose them again. We're struggling to create lasting change. So we have to get to the root cause of what's going on. 9 times out of 10 is because we don't really understand what's going on within ourselves and what we personally need, because we are attending these classes, which are amazing and they have good intentions, but sometimes the result ends up being a bit detrimental to the individual, because the individual also needs to understand themselves, as well as these boxes and these certain types of classes that are not allowing that recovery in there. There's a lack of education, I think, around, and we've actually, all 3 of us have been in the fitness education space, teaching trainers as well over the years, and it's a big gap in the education side as to the role rest and recovery plays, not just in our fitness, but in life in general, and the impact that then has on work, relationships, hobbies, finances, things you would least expect, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very overlooked, and we have to take responsibility for ourselves first, I think.
Yeah. It's just not very sexy, is it? It's just not very sexy. It's all about, you know, smash, especially here in Dubai, there's still that, you know, if it's not painful, if I'm not sweating, if I'm not exhausted, it's not working. And, you know, yeah, we do need to push that message out. I mean, and I've said to my friend who doesn't listen to me, he's still smashing the life out of himself. He sleeps poor, he's libido stress, everything you would associate with this kind of burnout situation. And all I've asked him to do for me is do 5 minutes of just, you know, recovery breathing, longer exhalation, breath work for 5 minutes, mate, just at the end of your session, just to send a signal to your nervous system that the danger's gone, you know, before you go home. So in terms of exercise, because we're talking about the value of exercise, and we're not saying to listeners, don't exercise. It's huge. Most people are not moving enough. So we must stress that, get out and walk, do something. But from a rest, digest, recovery standpoint, are there any particular modalities of exercise? Do you have a way you might approach someone who is that type A personality, working too hard, drinking too much caffeine, etc.?
Well, that was me. I used to train 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day. And if I wasn't getting the results, like I mentioned, I thought, I need to train more, I train harder. And I will challenge anyone who's listening to this, who's going through that with that mentality, is how's that working for you? Right? If you're constantly beasting yourself and you're not getting a result, that's a bit of a red flag. It's like, for me, I didn't start getting a result. I wanted till I slowed down. I went from 6 days a week in the gym to 3 days. And because I think the most important thing for anyone to remember, exercise and movement are very different. Okay, movement is instinctual. It's something we are meant to do with our body. Exercise is going to the gym, cycling. It's a specific thing that you do. You don't have to go to the gym to move. You don't have to be part of a sports team to move. You can go for a walk. You can go for a run, cycle, swim, dance. Just jump up and down. You can do whatever you want. Movement is moving your body more purposefully and mindfully. And then when I started doing that and slowing things down, that's when I started seeing results, because I was so stressed, and then I was going in and killing myself in the gym, which I was adding more stress onto my body, which was actually negating the results, because I was just causing more inflammation in my body. I wasn't resting, give my body time to recover and actually heal. Because remember, you don't see results when you're training. You don't see results through eating. It's through the rest and recovery process is where the results come. And I think that's so important. The food and the movement should be an afterthought of your recovery first. Sleep, recovery. Move your body mindfully. So when you go for a walk, even when you go to the gym, I'll ask anyone, is how mindful are you when you're actually exercising? Do you just shove your headphones in and block everything out and try to get through it? Or are you actually paying attention to how your body's feeling when you move? Are you paying attention to what's happening in your body from the tips of your toes to the top of your head? And people might be thinking, what's that got to do with anything? Very important. It's that mind-body connection. Because if you want your body to perform at its best, you need to understand what all the signals it's telling you. And if you've got tightness, you've got pain, you've got restriction, you're going into the feeling, I can't be bothered, but I'm going to force myself. These are all signals that your body's like notifying you of that there's something that you need to slow down and start to pay attention. But if you don't pay attention and you just block it out, you're completely disconnecting from your own body, and you're not going to see the results you want. You might do short term, but long term, you're not going to get that lasting change, those lasting results, because you're not paying attention to what your body's telling you.
That's so valuable. And I mean, that whole mind-body kinesthetic awareness, I mean, I took it from bodybuilding. Bodybuilding had a bit of a reputation for years, but the more I connect with bodybuilders and speak to guys that get on stage, and all right, there are other things involved in sculpting their physiques, but in terms of just the philosophy of training, the majority of clients are going into the gym. What are they going in for? Boosting insulin sensitivity is a plus. they're not going to really strength train because probably a bit too taxing on the nervous system. Hypertrophy, 8 to 12 repetition range, 3 sets. It's like they're training 3 times a week. It's not really about the reps. This is what I've learned from bodybuilders. It's about the intent. So you really want bang for buck. If you go in the gym, you want to get as much as you can out of that workout. And like you just said, John, it's about that connection, even to a bicep curl. If you want bigger guns, if you want your guns to get bigger, that's a perfectly acceptable goal. It's fine. Aesthetics is a part of it. Yeah, absolutely. Just bringing your mind to the whole movement, connecting with your body. There's some mindfulness in there, Charlotte, as well. Do you know what I mean? You can bring meditation to exercise. You really can. You can catch the thoughts, bring it back. And I think the biggest problem, and it may never change, but people like us are trying to change it, is people's association, I think, with exercise. And it's still body fat, weight loss. Weight loss. It's the association attached to it that probably drives the overtraining.
I'd want to add something as well there, especially for any female listeners that you have, or any men that are working with women as well in this field, because women have had for a very long time a lot of societal expectations around the way we should train, and we're supposed to essentially be able to keep up and do the same kind of class that a guy can do all day long, all month long, all year long. And for me, I remember getting really frustrated because I was also in that fitness space. There wasn't as many females at that time as what there are now. So it was often like me, maybe 2 or 3 other women, and then like times 10 by men, right? And so it was always like we were trying to keep up all the time. And for one, I'm exactly like you described, on somebody, a type A. I'm competitive, go. And I wanted to keep up. So for me, not being able to keep up was really infuriating. And it made me think, whoa, what is going on with me? Why can't I do this? And a lot of the data around women and the way that they should train is based on men. And a lot of the studies and trials are based on men. So the recommendations that are coming out that we should all train a certain way isn't taking necessarily the female setup as it should. So there's something that for any women that are listening is to look at what we call the infradian rhythm, right? So everybody knows that we have obviously our menstrual period throughout the month, but we also have 3 other phases, right? So there's 4 stages to the infradian rhythm. For every single stage, there is a different type of exercise that is more appropriate for us to be doing at that time based on what's going on hormonally in our system. So when I wasn't being able to say, let's say keep up with John in the gym, like that wasn't because something's wrong with me or I'm not fit enough. Actually, I'm really fit, but my body couldn't cope with that kind of exercise. So there's a certain time in the month that you'll be really thriving doing something like HIIT training, and there are other times when you want to be doing some strength training that's a bit slower paced, or you want to be doing something more like a yin yoga, right, or something like Pilates, and shifting your intensities to actually complement what you do. From there, you'll see massive strides when it comes to results, whether that's weight loss or anything else, because actually now you're giving your body what it actually needs. So yes, to lose weight, you need to be eating less than what you're moving and all the rest of it, right? But we do need to make sure that we are taking into account what is going on hormonally within ourselves so that we can really start to tailor it to the human being rather than just try and keep up with society. I would love, right, one of my kind of passion projects in future, and I think will be somehow, is providing programming for gyms and fitness facilities that includes that. So you can say, right, okay, you're in your follicular phase, you come and do this class. You're in your ovulation phase, come and do that class, right? Because that's really going to start to help inform and educate women. I was in the fitness industry for over a decade and I didn't know about that, right? All of the fitness education we used to teach, it didn't have any of that in it. That was then something that we would then just teach because it's something that we knew was so important, but it wasn't in the exams. So it's no fault of the trainers, it's no fault of the health clubs and the facilities or anything like that. It's just that we're shifting gears now into a new world where we've got more information, we've got more data, there's more studies being done on females. So it's really, really important that anyone listening to this just start to own that for yourself until it becomes a bit more mainstream.
That's really valuable. I mean, I'm aware of it, but I'd never contemplated different energy systems within the month. I never even considered that. And I think, like you say, what can happen is people judge themselves, and probably the biggest barrier to exercise is adherence for people. It's continuing to do something. And if people judge themselves, won't they? These belief systems around I'm lazy, I'm not motivated. And then, like you say, you train, you overtrain, you get ill, you don't train, you fall off the wagon, you're back to eating Maltesers on the sofa in the evening. So the exercise side is really important. And obviously, if people are interested, I'm quite interested in learning more about what you just spoke about there, Charlotte. But obviously, if there are female listeners, we will post everything, all your details in the show notes, and that's so valuable, just training providers. On your PT qual, there is this section, because it all tends to just be, if you want to learn a bit more about women, go and do pre and postnatal. That's it.
Exactly.
That's it. It's like, I want to work with women pre and postnatal. Yeah, but not all women they want careers. It's not all about. That's it. Oh, osteopenia, bit of osteoporosis. Learn about that, because women. It's so true, isn't it?
Just for a resource there for anyone listening then that wants to obviously go and learn about this. Any women, any guys, go and read the book In the Flow by Elisa Vitti. It will give you just a fast track overview in nutrition based on the female cycle and exercise on the female cycle, and also productivity, which I found hugely powerful as well.
Thank you.
In the Flow by Elisa.
Brilliant. I'll put that in the show notes also. So yeah, we've talked about exercise, but let's shift gears slightly now, and let's talk about what you guys do and why you won that recent award for your work. So how you have a client that comes to you, the client is like, look, I'm burnt out, I'm stressed. I've seen you guys on social media, help me. Where would someone, or do you talk us through the journey that someone can experience with you guys?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think it's important to recognize that everybody comes because stress is manifesting in different ways, right? So it might be chronic pain, it might be negative thinking, overthinking, tension in the body. It could be like poor emotional regulation and panic attacks, anxiety. It shows up in different ways for everyone. So when we're talking about stress here, we're talking about stress very holistically, right? And I think it's really important to just know that stress will manifest itself different for every individual. So anyone listening, how is your experiencing with stress first and foremost, and think about that as we continue this conversation. So we have something called the stress awareness pyramid. Did you want to jump into that?
I just wanted to kind of build on what we're talking about with stress. It's very important, I think, for anyone listening as well, because we've talked a lot about stress on the negative impact it has on us, but stress is good for us.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the negative impact, we talk about chronic stress. So stress is a vital part of human nature. It's like you need stress in the gym, when you're training. If you want to get stronger, you want to get bigger, you want to get fitter, you need stress if you're changing jobs or you're changing countries, because it helps you adapt, it helps you grow, become more resilient. So, but what we don't need is chronic stress. When we hold on to emotions, when we hold on to situations and we don't process things and let things go, that becomes chronic. And that chronic stress is what creates that buildup of inflammation in the body and stops us from losing weight. It stops us from gaining muscle, it stops us from sleeping, stops us from recovering, it stops us from healing. So it's very important that stress is not bad, it's not good. We need it, but we need resourceful stress. So it's so important for anyone listening to realize stress is a vital part of our growth as human beings, but we need to become aware of when it becomes unhealthy for us. That's very, very important.
Love it.
It's funny, there was a study done at the start of this year, 2023, in the UAE by the Signal and Wellbeing Survey that showed that 98% of people in the UAE have experienced at least one symptom of burnout, right? That's insane. 98% have experienced one symptom of burnout. So we can see that chronic stress is rampant, right? And we have to start doing something about it. So to answer your question is, when someone comes to us, essentially we have what we call a stress awareness pyramid, right? So we experience stress in 3 different levels. We have our day-to-day stress, which is a kind of our life level, which is at the top of that pyramid. We have a health level, which is the center of that pyramid, where we're talking about our lifestyle. We're talking about movement, sleep, nutrition, hydration, emotional regulation, all these different things. And then we have at the base of that pyramid, the root level, which is then what's feeding our health and our life. And at that root level is things like unresolved emotions. It's our belief system. It's our value system. It's the relationship we have with that inner child. It's potentially past traumas that people have experienced that are now coming up and out through our lives that perhaps we've overlooked. Because very often, you know, like you described with your friend who's, you know, you've asked him just to do 5 minutes of conscious breathing, right, to recover. But yet if he's still not doing that, that is a big, you know, signal to say there's something going on at that root level that is driving him to behave in that way that he either is or he isn't. So everything that happens at that foundational level is informing everything else. So one of the biggest mistakes we often see is people trying to change things in their life, right? My job's stressing me out, so I'm going to get a different one. My relationship's stressing me out, so I'm going to get a different one, right? And we tend to try and almost like put a bit of a band-aid over it rather than actually look any deeper at how we regulating ourselves from a lifestyle perspective, but then also what's going on behind that is what we tend to ignore. So stress runs a lot deeper than we think. And because life is so fast, more often than not, people don't want to look at that stuff because it feels like it's going to be a lot of work.
Charlotte, would I be right in saying this is the layer where self-sabotage is living? I don't know, you know, why people talk about self-sabotaging stuff in their life, when it be jobs, relationships. It's in that foundation. It's lurking in there. The reasons behind it. It
is absolutely, and because it is exactly that, right? We go kind of in these extremes, like we think like life's out to get us, right? And we blame the boss. This is why we're stressed. We blame something else as to why we're stressed, and we live in that stress illusion. Then when that passes a little bit, then it's us doing it to ourselves, right? So it is at that point where you're absolutely right. We do have to then, I believe the antidote to self-sabotage is personal responsibility, so that we're not falling victim to self-sabotage and we start to just own our stuff. And that doesn't mean that it's your fault if you haven't in the past or anything like that. If you experience self-sabotage, it's a very normal experience, but it doesn't have to be, right? Because we can just shine a spotlight and say, okay, well, what's going on? Like, what of my needs are not being fulfilled right now? Or where in my life is something misaligned that is causing me to act out of alignment and sabotage myself, right? And all of this stuff is happening usually so unconsciously that it's completely okay to not know that we've got these blind spots. But it's when we know that we're self-sabotaging and we just accept it and take it as part of who we are, right? It's like, well, I'm just not a gym person, right? Or I just love my Maltesers on the sofa every night, right? Like we start to adopt it as who we are, and that can also become a big part of the problem, because now we're living in conflict with who it is we believe that we are, right? It's like there's a part of me that wants to be fit and ripped and living life to the maximum, you know, live life to its fullest and have no regrets and go out there and really live in whatever way that means for you, whether that be looking after your kids or spending time with loved ones or getting to the peak of your career. Like most people want that, right? Or they're almost chasing that in some way or striving towards it. And there's that side of them, but then it's in conflict with the other side of them that doesn't want to live congruently with that life. And that's, like you quite rightly recognize, is living in that root level.
And I suppose, just thinking off the top of my head, that's where those fears, because I've always associated a lack of change with people. I say it's not a lack of willpower or you're lazy or you don't want this thing. Fundamentally, there's a fear, a fear that's stopping you. So yeah, if we wouldn't mind just unpackaging that for us, that's a deep layer, guys. I suspect I'm scared of that layer myself, even though you're talking about it. I get a bit frightened of that layer. I'm like, all right,
everyone is.
I'm all for being authentic. Not me now live, and we're not going to unpack my deep layer live on the podcast, but I've had too much coffee and I've been to the gym. I'm already in a sympathetic state. I'll start shaking and stuff and then crying. But so this is stuff that you guys specifically work with people. This is you delve into this level. If you wouldn't mind telling us more, because I'm genuinely, from a personal perspective, keen to understand more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, don't worry, we won't do that on the podcast.
Don't do it to me now. No, I'm too vulnerable. It's too early.
No, so here's the thing, right? The root level can sound a bit scary, right? And even unpacking your own stuff can sound really scary. And from our personal experience, it's not always easy to do that. So we have to start somewhere that feels comfortable. Because like you said, fear plays a massive role. And if you go back to what we said at the very beginning about stress, right? And going into that fight or flight mode or this shutdown mode, that is our body, right? Thinking that we're under threat. So really, we've got to start to look, okay, what's the antidote to that? If we feel threatened, then we want to feel safe, right? So any work that we do when we're looking inward, we're just really striving to feel safer within ourselves. So I think the first point of call is to recognize, well, what helps you feel safe? Before we unpack because there's loads of different elements to that root level, which we won't have time to unpack all of them today. But if you almost look at that root level as your safety net and creating safety within you. So understand, what is it that you're afraid of? If you do get in the shape that you want or to the level that you want, is there something that you feel like you're going to lose? Because often we get so comfortable with the life that we have that actually maybe there's something that we can almost lose as a result of going after those things. And that is often quite limiting because it's not usually true. So then we have to look at the belief system and understand, okay, well, what is it that you believe about that relationship or that job? If you did show up in this way, if you did show up feeling really confident and relaxed and resourceful and just on it, what could life be like if you didn't lose anything, right? And if you really felt completely congruent, what would that feel like? So at that root level, yes, okay, there's definitely some fear there, but it's a case of how do we approach that fear in a way that you feel comfortable to start with? And that could just be looking at, what do you think is going to happen if you was to go after the thing you want or to lean into the thing that you want the most? Because often, there's underlying fears of not being enough, right? Or fears of being unsafe or lacking security. And they're usually the two most universal fears that hold us back. And so they're a good place to start when you're thinking about fear. But also then you have to start to pinpoint, where in your life did you learn that? Right. And that's when you have to start to really maybe go back a little bit and just check, okay, well, maybe I learned it from modeling parents or from society, but maybe that's not true for me. And you start to have to really kind of analyze. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I really resonate with everything you just said there. And that whole thing about feeling safe, it's really interesting. So I'm doing my first long silent retreat in the summer in Devon. So I'm coming back to the UK, Gaia House. I'm doing the 8-day silent retreat. And when I tell people, kid you not, even my wife, even now, I've told her a few times, she still looks at me and say, why would you do such a thing? Like people ask me and I'm like, I'm doing, but fundamentally, my mentor, my meditation teacher told me that, and it just, when you just said that about feeling safe, she said, look, Matt, if you sit with yourself for 8 days, stuff's coming up. All right. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster. It's your first long silent retreat. But she said, when you finish that retreat and you step out into the world, you're going to have so much confidence in yourself. Because we hop on our phones or distract ourselves with a whole myriad of things in life. Could be training, could be work. So that was actually one of the refreshing things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not under any illusion this is going to be a stroll in the park. But I'm looking forward to really coming out the other end and having spent time with myself. And the other thing that popped up into my head when you were talking about feeling safe was, and maybe not going after stuff in life because of, subconscious stuff, fear around stuff, is I've had this relationship with death, not in a morbid way, but I've read a lot of books about death. And I think about my own death, but not in like, I'm scared and I'm frightened, I don't want to die. It's like, it's happening. And nobody really, once I'm gone, a couple of generations, no one will remember me. So it's just kind of like right sizing myself. It's like, I get one go at this. Do you know what I mean? It's like, don't take yourself too seriously because, like everybody else, the journey ends and then other people take over. I don't know if that made any sense, but it's really helped me just get out of myself, not take myself too seriously and realize that nobody really cares. Really, what Matt's doing, Matt and his business and his plans and his dreams, like nobody really cares. My wife doesn't really care. She does, but she's got her own stuff. I bore her every day. That's the good thing. You guys work together. You can talk business. I just bore my wife. She walks in from work. I've been on my own as a solopreneur, and as she walks in, I just attack her with my plans and my things. Anyway, I'm rambling, but that sounds good. So the deep layer, come and work with you. But I suspect they're getting that layer when they work with you, but they're getting almost getting their hand held and, you know, being guided through that stuff. But you guys are working on the other stuff, which I think is pretty unique. It seems to be either let's deal with the fitness stuff and the sleep and the eating, and let's go and see a therapist and talk about, you know, the inner child and the emotions and the feelings. It strikes me that you guys are actually, you've webbed that together.
Exactly. It's just on that, because you mentioned your retreat. So you'll find great clarity coming out of your retreat, by the way. I did the 10-day in, I think it was 2015. And it was one of the most uncomfortable, most powerful things ever. So I cheer on anybody that's doing that. But funnily enough, off the back of that is when wellness theory was actually conceived. It was that just everything clicked into place through that meditation process that just made it right to bring it all together, which is why we then brought together Jonathan's skill set and experience and mine also, and then obviously now the partners that we work with to deliver a lot of this. And but it came from taking that time of stillness, removing distractions to gain that level of clarity. But yeah, that's exactly what happens. So our clients work obviously from the lifestyle health perspective, and then they do a bit of both. And
it's just important. The reason we kind of integrated kind of all these areas of wellness is because nothing works on its own. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with the healthcare system at the moment is everything is segregated. If you got something wrong with your brain, you go and see this person. You got something wrong with your body, you go see this person. You got something wrong with your gut, you go see this person. The problem is no one talks to each other. And what's happening in your head is affecting everything else. What's happening in your body affects everything else. It's all interconnected. It's integrated. Nothing works. No system works on its own. Yeah. So this is where we go down that route of unpacking the foundation, that root, but at the same time is looking at the health level. Okay, how's your sleep? How's your nutrition? How are your quality of thinking? How's your energy? Because you can work on that foundational stuff, which is great, and you're unpacking. But if your body is literally in a sorry state, basically, then you haven't got the vehicle to be able to then go forward and basically thrive. Like if you're unpacking all this and then you're still sitting on the sofa eating Maltesers and McDonald's every day, it's like, come on, you're not doing yourself justice. But vice versa as well. If you're doing everything under the sun, you're tracking your sleep, you're taking supplements, you're training in the gym, you're eating quote unquote clean, but then you're not dealing with your emotions or your thoughts. Same thing's happening. You're not building the dots and those connections that are vital. So it's important to know to work on everything. So everything is layered. So you're working on your foundation, but at the same time you're working on your sleep, and at the same time you're working on the life level of, am I in the right job right now? Is where I am in my life right now serving me to be able to live my true authentic self? So you can't just work on one thing and forget everything else. It's got to be an integrated approach, but you have to meet someone where they are. But you can't go, okay, you're a new person, first day, we're going to unpack your childhood trauma. You're going to sleep 8 hours a day. You're going to drink 3 liters of water. You're going to change your diet completely. Okay, go. It's like, what? Like, that's overwhelming. So you've got to start with we'd love to start with the lowest hanging fruit, like the biggest returns of investment for people. And the biggest return of investment for every single human being on this planet is sleep. Is because sleep affects everything. Poor sleep affects how you digest food. Poor sleep affects how your body feels, how you're able to train and move. Poor sleep affects how you process your negative thinking and emotions. So sleep is the biggest return on investment. It doesn't cost anything to start working on. So that's one of the first things we start to get people to understand. But at the same time, around that, you're working on those thoughts, those emotions, that food at the same time.
It's such a valuable message that you guys are promoting, and it's so needed. But unfortunately, what people are doing is they are just attacking the HIIT class, or they're carnivore, or they're vegan, and they're all in for a period of time, and then that fails and they pick something else up, and it's just, it's continuous. And what I loved what you said there, John, was the whole, I mean, I always quote Joe Dispenza about thoughts creating feelings, feelings creating thoughts. It's kind of like you can metabolize that adrenaline and cortisol in your system at the class in the evening, but if you go home and your patterns of thinking, you have no decent relationship with your mind, you're locked into negativity bias, you've no understanding of these streams of thoughts, those negative thoughts create the same feelings. You go to bed jacked up on cortisol and adrenaline, you don't sleep, your nutrition's poor. And what I also loved, John, was the mention of the disconnect. So I've seen it here in the UAE. In the UK, I worked on exercise referral schemes for about a decade. So, you know, there was a clear relationship between the doctor, the GP, and the gym. All right. There wasn't, you know, they weren't very good at sending the forms over correctly, the GPs, but they'd send people our way, right? We'd do our outcome measures, and it was there. It was like, come to 12 weeks, come and see Matt. Doctors sent you. We'll take you for a 12-week course, and then hopefully you stay. There's nothing here in the UAE. So I was teaching the exercise referral qualification. It's called the chronic conditions course now. I'm teaching that here. And it's like, it's so private medical, gyms. Private medical don't trust fitness community. Fitness community don't trust them because they judge them, because how can you possibly be improving people's health when you're 60 pounds overweight and you smoke, etc. But I really feel there needs to be some kind of connection, but that's probably another conversation. There was also something you mentioned, John. You started talking about work. So I know that a big part of what you guys do is you go into corporates, and I know I'm conscious of your time. We haven't got much time left, but you know, what people talk about work-life balance and this being a problem, and it is, but I've been reading a lot of, I read Gallup's recent book, you know, the Gallup polling stuff. They go in and do the well-being stuff in companies. And the thing that really surprised me was, as fitness professionals, wellness, will go in and we'll fix the sleep and we'll fix this, but career well-being, this is Gallup, who are kind of leaders in the statistics on corporate well-being. It's like career well-being, like, you know, the job is important. And I think we've got to a stage now where everyone's like, oh, you don't get to the end of your life and wished you'd worked more. It's like, no, but our jobs and our purpose and our career, they are important. And I think going into organizations, and anyway, you know what I'm saying. I'll put it over to you, but it's just like, it's important how your managers treat you.
It's a funny one, right? And this is one of the reasons why we've gone all in when it comes to our corporate offering as well now with the different partners that we work with, purely because I think companies have realized, especially since the pandemic, that they have good intentions to bring somebody in to run some meditation workshops, or to do a workshop on mental health, or to bring somebody in to do some yoga at the desk and all that kind of stuff, right? The companies have tried these things, and that the numbers are still plummeting, right? People are still burnt out, performances poor, their top talent is leaving. You know, there's so many challenges that are happening. And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between the understanding of the role wellness and well-being play in the workplace and in our lives in general, right? Because we could be the healthiest people in the world, pick us up and put us in a toxic work environment, and we can suddenly really suffer. So we have to marry the two. We have to look at the individual wellness of a human being and the environmental well-being, so that those two things can both thrive together. And the problem that I've noticed and that we've seen, not just in the UAE, but just in that kind of corporate well-being space, is that it's one or the other, right? It's, you've got one department, you've perhaps got like learning development teams and HR teams that are trying to, you know, create a healthy culture. And then you've got somebody else that's responsible for bringing somebody in to do the wellness things. And these two hands are not speaking to each other. And again, like we've just said about the healthcare system and things being segregated, the same is happening in the workplace. So we have to start to look at whose responsibility is it? There's so much out there now. We've got some of the top experts saying, well, it's the corporation, it's the company, it's their responsibility. And you've got like the individuals are kind of blaming the corporation as well. And we truly believe it's a shared responsibility, right? Has to work two ways for it to work efficiently. The companies have provided those like workshops and things, but then the onus has fallen back onto the individual, and it's then the individual's wrong or bad if they haven't implemented it. So the pressure still falls on the shoulder of the employee rather than on the company, even though the company's got good intentions because they're trying. It's just not landing the way they want it to. So we have to start to look at other factors that are included in the organization.
It's not, you say health education and, you know, getting a vendor to come in and deliver a session. The results are not, they're not that impressive when you look at the stats. You know, it's like the guys at the top, the guys making decisions, the guys creating culture, the guys that have influence. We need to be sorting these guys out, and then managers need to become coaches. You know, there's you know, you're coaching people. You're coaching people, and it is really, really complicated. And that's what I've realized. And I'm so pleased that I've connected with people like yourselves, organizations who are doing this stuff, because the more I read about it and the more I go into organizations, the more I realize, like, you just layers of the onion. You're like, wow, this is complicated. I might not need somebody a bit outside my scope of practice to come in and help if I really, and I think this is what it's about. I think like yourself, guys, I've got a real passion for helping people because of my earned and learned experience. You know, I've been in the darkness. I worked in corporate when I got my sports science degree. I worked for a corporate. I left because of burnout, whatever you want to call it, and mental health issues. I understand it, and it's just ticking over. And GDP is ruling, and it's all about capitalism. It's more money. I mean, my wife's an economist, and she's like, you know, anyway, I'll let her talk about that. But she's like, how can we be measuring the success of a country based on growth and GDP? It's like, surely it's got to be a bit more about people. I don't know, but this is another level to what you guys are offering. So you guys are offering the unpacking the stuff, the real stuff. You're fixing what's going on underneath the hood, the engine. You're looking at the sleep, the nutrition, all the wellness stuff that you guys can offer. And you're also now able to go into organizations and help change culture.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not something we're necessarily doing all on our own. You know, we're working with some key partners who really specialize in those areas when it comes to looking at a company's workload. How are they managing that? How are they rewarding and recognizing their teams? How are they dealing with their relationships? You know, and obviously we're informing a lot of the programming of that with them. So it's, we've got the best of the best working together to be able to help these organizations. But there's simple things that individuals can do as well, right? So like you've said, we need to be more compassionate leaders. We need to be able to lead by example as well from that leadership and management level. But anybody that's listening to this podcast that works for somebody else can start to adopt things and have an awareness about themselves in order to be able to actually make a difference, right? So obviously, if you do have any, leaders that are listening to this that really, really want to make a difference, we have something that we call the Thrive model, which is where we help companies essentially look after their talent in the most effective and efficient ways. We help them look at all of their high performance metrics and methods so that they can actually start to get the most, they can get that extra out of their employees without them burning out and suffering and then losing them. The R in our Thrive method is results. So we help them to look at where are they actually losing money because of these issues that are associated with chronic stress and like poor culture. We then help them innovate and actually deliver this stuff in fun, innovative ways that actually create lasting change. The V in our model is vitality, right? So all of these moving parts work together. Like we said, things are segregated. We bring it in as one so that we can help to raise that vitality when it comes to actually the outcomes that the company is looking to have, but also how the individuals feel when they're at work. And also then from an engagement standpoint, how can companies actually get a return on them investing in their employees? Because a lot of programs out there's some great wellness providers, they're great people who are able to go into companies and showcase these amazing things, but then after a month it falls off and then the numbers wane and they don't get the buy-in they want. Now we've got organizations losing faith in the wellbeing programs because the engagement isn't there. So essentially we help the company to keep that engagement over the long term so they can start to see the benefits from a financial standpoint, but also from a productivity standpoint and a team cohesion standpoint as well, which is really, really important. So that's for kind of any listeners that you have with organizations, at least.
That's amazing. And actually, I mean, I'm conscious of your time, guys, but and we're coming up on the hour, but just that last piece that you spoke about, I would absolutely love to get you guys back on to talk in more detail about exactly what you do for organizations, because it's kind of an area, direction I want to start steering the podcast anyway. You know, I actually get people on talking about this stuff and helping people understand that there are solutions. You know, we've been banging a drum about health and well-being for individuals, but as you so kindly pointed out, it's the onus shouldn't really be on individuals. Workplaces should be places that support, you know, the individual and their families. You know, it's a huge thing. Now, in terms of how people connect with this award-winning organization, I love it. The Wellness Platform of the Year, John in a 3-piece or 2-piece, looking very dapper. And you looked also, Charlotte, you looked very smart as well. But it's been all about John and his suit, but you know, you'd also look glamorous. How can people reach out? I mean, I will list all this stuff in the show notes, but where are the best places to find you guys and all the wonderful help that you can provide?
The easiest place is our website, thewellnesstheory.com. So that's where you find everything that we do. Obviously, our contact details to reach out to us as well. So yeah, that's the easiest place. We're also on obviously Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is great for any obviously individuals and organizations, and Instagram is more person centric, let's say, than organization centric.
Amazing. And have you guys got plans for the rest of the day? Are you busy? Is it work or resting today?
Recovery day today. Yeah.
Good, John. Practice what you preach, my friend. I went to the gym this morning. Probably didn't need to train. I thought about it a lot, drinking coffee and training. I don't want to be a fat middle-aged man. Don't tell anyone. Bit body dysmorphic I am, honestly. Shh, don't say and tell anyone. Right, guys, absolutely amazing. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so pleased I've connected with you from a purely selfish standpoint. It's great to know people like you carrying such a wonderful message. John and Charlotte, you've been amazing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Thanks.